Hey, thank you. Good morning to you all at this early hour. You're joining the Catalysing Water Stewardship in Value Chain session. My name is Hans Bogaert. I'm a manager at the Dutch Development Bank, FMO. Work for the Agribusiness Department, and I have the honor to moderate this session. So a session about water stewardship in value chains. Over the weekend, actually, I read an article about the Colorado River Basin and the water crisis that is happening over there, and you know that showed the impact of water and water stress on a huge region. In this case, 7 regions in the states, and the impact that it has on value chains in the Colorado Basin. And it's really huge. It has really big impact on people, on farmers, power. So it is a very relevant subject, and probably value chains are a good way to frame it and to use as a context for water stewardship. Now, we have a very interesting mix of value chains represented by a few very interesting companies today. They are in the panel. Quickly introducing the panel. We have Sarah Wade, who basically is a sector lead at the Alliance for Water Stewardship, AWS. She will give a short presentation right after my intro. Andre Buckler from Edeka. We have Karen Kennedy from PepsiCo. Maeve Hall from Unilever. Liesel Truscott, she represents the textile exchange. She also will explain a bit more about that. And Anneke Koning from Bestseller. It's a very big Danish fashion group. So a nice mix of value chains, but I'm sure that there's a lot of overlap between these chains in the way they address water stewardship. In the end, it's about what's very important in value change is that somewhere in the value chain, producers or suppliers take a decision to procure water or to produce stuff that uses water, and that has an impact on the water footprint throughout the value chain. So it's very important that the different actors in a value chain connect with each other and try to come to a common understanding on water stewardship, on water approach in a value chain. If there's a difference in that approach, if in the beginning of the value chain actors have a different understanding, do act differently, have different standards, then in the end of the value chain, things go wrong. I think it's very good that that Alliance for Water Stewardship is trying to set standards in this respect, because we need standards to talk the same language. I think it's very important. FMO, we invest in agribusiness, in food companies, projects, particularly in emerging markets. And their water stress is also a big issue. And for us, it's very important that water is used by our clients in a sustainable way, which means that they don't look at their own water resource, their own project alone, but they coordinate with the other water users in their sector and consumers of water, utility companies, to make sure that the water they use is not depleting the water resource, but is sort of used in a circular, in a sustainable way. I think that is that for the intro. I'm looking forward to the discussion. We move over to just one thing is important that after Sarah, we will have like half an hour of discussion with the panel, sort of questions, and the last 15 minutes of the hour is reserved for questions from the audience. So please, if you have questions, if you have remarks, shoot, so that we'll make sure that it's a bit of an interactive discussion. Of course, recognizing the early hours, so I hope you all have a very strong coffee at your side. Sarah, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hans, and hello everyone. It's great to see lots of participants joining us today. As Hans said, my name is Sarah Wade and I am the sector lead at AWS. I'm going to kick off the session today with just a few short slides just to help ground our conversation. And then I will hand back over to Hans to hear from our panel. So to start, what is water stewardship? I'm sure many of you already know the answer to this question. But AWS has a specific definition of water stewardship, so we always like to start our sessions by sharing it. There are some particularly important elements highlighted in green. So in the AWS standard, we define water stewardship as the use of water that is socially and culturally equitable, environmentally sustainable, and economically beneficial, achieved through a stakeholder inclusive process that involves both site and catchment-based actions. But what's different about this, and why isn't normal water management enough? Well, site-based actions such as efficiency measures are not enough to overcome the scale of the water crisis that we face today, as you will well know. One aspect of this is also that water is often simply too cheap. So cost-related impacts alone are not enough to stimulate the types of actions that we know are required to solve the problems that we face around the world. The other important factor to consider is that water-related issues vary depending on the local context. So a one-size-fits-all approach is simply not going to address the risks that a water-using organization of any kind is likely to face. Consider this. What use is it to make your farm or your factory super efficient if the next water user further downstream just uses up that water instead by expanding their own production to take advantage of there being more water available from your efforts? How can one farm or factory build resilience in the face of a changing climate if everyone using water in the catchment carries on as normal? And this is really where water stewardship comes in. It involves taking all of the actions required on your own site within your own boundaries, but going beyond that to then work with others in the catchment or watershed that you rely on to identify and address shared water risks and challenges, which form the basis of many of the world's water problems that we're facing. For global brands and retailers, this means not just working in your own operations to ensure that you're doing everything you should be, but also starting to look into your supply chain to identify whether you might be exposed to risks there instead. And if you are, working with your suppliers through a water stewardship approach to address those risks together. I'll tell you a little bit more about AWS as well. AWS is two things. We are a global membership collaboration and a sustainability standard for robust, credible water stewardship. AWS members come from business, civil society, and the public sector. And since membership was launched back in 2016, it's grown globally to over 150 organizations. AWS members unite behind our definition of water stewardship and a common approach to doing water stewardship at the site and catchment level, which is the International Water Stewardship Standard, or the AWS standard. The standard, which you can see on the right of your screen there, was first launched in 2014, and it has since evolved through our first revision process. The standard has 5 steps and 5 outcomes, as you can see on the far right of the screen, and it can be used by any water user anywhere in the world. Anyone is welcome to download the standard and the accompanying general guidance from a4ws.org for free. We also provide a number of other resources to help organizations on their water stewardship journey, including training, case studies, webinars, and lots of other types of knowledge products. And you can find all this and more about our organization on our website. Now, that's all from me, because the main purpose of our session today is for you to hear from different organizations working within the AWS system, but I'll be staying on the chat to answer any questions you have about AWS. I'll leave you with this message. A responsible water steward should aspire to achieve a positive impact on the catchment. They should use the resource as sustainably as possible, and they must look beyond an organization's boundary to consider its interaction in the catchment as a whole and the related impact on others. I'm really looking forward to hearing from all our panelists, and with that, I will hand back over to Hans.
Thank you, Sarah. That was very interesting and clear. Okay, panel, very welcome. Please open your videos so we can also see you. The first question I have, maybe it's good also as an intro to the audience to give a bit more background on basically your company, what kind of value chain you operate, and in what stage you are in the whole water stewardship journey. Maybe let's start, of course, ladies, with Karen from PepsiCo. Maybe before you explain it, Karen, what is your role in PepsiCo?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Hans. My name is Karen Kennedy, and I work in PepsiCo's Global Sustainability Office. I'm focusing on water stewardship. So delighted to be here today to talk about our sustainability efforts. And actually, our timing is very good because we launched our Net Water Positive Vision last week, which is our 2030 ambition associated with water stewardship, where we're aiming to reduce our water use everywhere where we operate. And that includes both our company-owned operations and third-party manufacturers. And we're also looking at improving watershed health in all of our high water risk operations by investing in replenishment projects and identifying nature-based solutions. So it's a really good time for us to be involved in water stewardship, because as a big food organization, we recognize that water is critical to our operations. Good water supplies are absolutely essential. We have a very big agro supply chain, value chain as well. So obviously, good water resources are critical there. So our ambition is that everywhere where PepsiCo operates, water resources are in a better state because of our presence. So we've been on this journey for many years. We started off in water stewardship back in 2006, where we really focused within our four walls, driving operational efficiency. In recent times, we have recognized that water stewardship requires many actors, many players in order to deliver and drive performance at scale. So we're really interested in getting involved in where we can use our influence to exert pressure on bringing our suppliers, our value chain, our partners on that journey and really have a positive impact on the water catchment that we operate in.
Thank you very much, Karen. Maybe moving to Maeve, Unilever. Maybe, yeah, does it sound familiar to you?
Very familiar, and congratulations, Karen and the PepsiCo team for their recent announcements. Very ambitious and really excited to be joining you on this journey as well around water stewardship. I'm Maeve Hall. I'm the Group Manufacturing Sustainability Manager, and I lead the water programme in our manufacturing operations. I'm calling in from the beautiful Thames. This is my river catchment in the UK. For those that don't know Unilever, you might be one of the 2.5 billion people that use our products every day. We've got more than 400 brands, so maybe you know our brands in 190 countries, those brands like Hellmann's or Dove or Magnums. Together with like a phenomenal internal and external network of water professionals, we're also on our own journey, collective action, collaborative journey around water as well. But water's always been a key environmental issue for Unilever, similar to PepsiCo. It's it's an ingredient. It's also essential for our full value chain. So from growing agricultural produce through to raw material suppliers and manufacturing operations, right through to the consumer use. So if our consumers don't have access to water, they're unable to use their shampoos and laundry powders within their homes. Since 2008, we've been driving water efficiency predominantly across our value chain. So in our manufacturing operations, we've taken out nearly 50% of our footprint. And we've had some early experience with collective action around and inclusive stakeholder approaches around water through our Indian operations, a really amazing program called Prabat that we've got there. But last year, we also announced our new ambition for 2030. Within that, we had a commitment around implementing water stewardship programs in 100 of our most water stressed factories. But this was just one of 3 commitments. The others around transitioning all our ingredients to biodegradable ingredients for our home care and BPC, beauty and personal care categories, and engaging in collective action through the 2030 Water Resources Group to really look at security of supply for our consumers. But we joined AWS about a year ago, but I've been a friend of AWS for many years now. And we've been, over the last year, been implementing steps 1 and 2 in 12 sites across 4 locations. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about that.
Okay, thanks, Maeve. So moving maybe to Andre Buckler from Edeka. I mean, if you look at PepsiCo, Unilever, these are the producing the products that end up into your retail chain, right?
Yeah.
So I can imagine, as a bit of a layman, that the further you are from the source, maybe the more challenging it is to influence the water footprint.
It is. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Maybe before diving into the deep, maybe tell a bit about Edeka, please.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Andre Böckler. I'm a sustainability manager at Edeka. For those who didn't know Edeka, we are a leading food retailer from Germany. We are located in Hamburg, in the north of Germany, and we are working with about 3,600 independent retailers who stand for entrepreneurial action and customer proximity in our region. And we have 12 million customers a day. And we are taking responsibility for more than 100 years. And since 2009, we have been in a partnership with WWF Germany regarding sustainability, and fresh water or water stewardship is one major topic within our working streams. And therefore, water is essential for our business, and we have and we think we have to work on it. And our main geographies regarding water stewardship in our supply chain or value chains are Southern Europe, for example, Spain, Italy, and Greece. Additionally, we are working in the MENA region or Latin America regarding water stewardship. And our aim or our target is to get 100% transparency regarding our supply chains and regarding water stewardship. And we are currently focusing on fresh produce, fruits and vegetables. And until the end of this month, we want to have the 100% transparency throughout our supply chains via analyzing our risks with our own water risk tool, which is based on the water risk filter from WWF and DEG. And what we learned in the past is it's very difficult to create a short-term business case regarding water stewardship for our producers or growers in our supply chain. It's not very easy to convince them to go this further step. And you also need to provide water stewardship capacity with local knowledge in the relevant river basins where we work. For example, in Colombia or Ecuador, where we launched a banana project, and we also have implemented the AWS and finally the AWS certification. And additionally, our main focus is on own brand products. We have about 5,000 own products in our supply chain, and we think we have to analyze our water risk regarding that. And we are a strategic member of AWS since 2016, and we also entered a trilateral cooperation with AWS and WWF Germany regarding water stewardship. Okay. That's our framework behind us.
Okay, so already hear the importance of coalitions, right? That's coming already through to your story. So we'll come back later to that. That's good. So this was the food and agri and retail side. Now let's move to the textile and the fashion. To be honest, I'm not that fashionistic, but maybe after this meeting it will change, hopefully. Let's start with Anneke. You're from Bestseller. Can you tell a bit about the company, about your value chains, where you are in the water stewardship journey?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Hans, and good morning to everyone. Early morning for a lot of people, I assume. Well, I'm Anneke. I am working for Bestseller. It's a Danish-based fashion brand. I'm located in Copenhagen, but we operate in 70 markets actually, and we have approximately 20 brands at the moment. Those brands that produce garments, sell their garments, they are fully reliant on suppliers and the supply chain. So we do not have any owned operations ourselves besides shops. This means that a little bit compared to what Andre was saying, we have a very complex supply chain where we have to deal with. And I think this is an issue in most of the fashion industry, is that we have very lot of challenges with traceability. And Andre also mentioned traceability already. Because of the complexity of the supply chain, it is sometimes really hard to get to completely down to where our product is being grown. So where are the fibers, the cotton, where we make our clothes from is being grown? Where is the fabric that the garment are made of? Where is it dyed? Where are the garments manufactured? This is I would say, a challenge and a topic that we're working on heavily at the moment. As you might understand, fashion industry is very reliant on water. We need water to grow, for example, cotton. We also need water to dye the fabrics, and there's water needed when you buy a garment or a t-shirt, for example, you need to wash it. So also water is needed there. So the whole industry is very dependent on water. And this is also why we find it very important to talk about water. Internally, we have committed to set water targets, but we have no concrete water targets yet. And partly that is because it's such a complex topic. We know that water is very site specific, and we would like to address the water challenges on the site, like AWS is doing on the catchment area. But this is not always possible since we don't have 100% traceability. But this does not mean that we have not done anything in the past, of course. We have working with a lot of our suppliers on water management, and since a couple of years also been actively involved in AWS. And some of our suppliers have implemented the AWS standards, and we are very much interested in how they are going to the journey. It has some really positive outcomes that they have implemented AWS standards, so we would like to see how we can implement this more going forward. But all in all, I could say we are quite much in the beginning of a water stewardship journey.
Okay, thanks, Anneke. Now then we move to Liesel, the textile exchange. Liesel, could you elaborate a bit about textile exchange and also about your value chain, which is probably a bit similar to Bestseller, and then your role?
Thanks, Hans. Yeah, I'm excited to be on this panel with all the rest of the great speakers. Nice and early here. My background is New Zealand, as the Waikino Gorge in New Zealand. Actually, I'm Kiwi but based in the UK, and I'm the director of corporate benchmarking at Textile Exchange. And for those that don't know Textile Exchange, we're a non-profit organisation. We have a membership base, including Bestseller, and over 600 companies ranging from, and other organizations ranging from brands and retailers to manufacturers and processors and farmers and other raw material producers. So we do try and have that very inclusive approach to convening and problem solving and moving our sector forward. As Anneke pointed out, there's a lot of opportunities within textiles, a lot going on, a lot of challenges to face all through that very long and complex value chain that Anneke also mentioned. Textile Exchange tends to focus down at the raw material production area, so looking at the cotton growing, the synthetic fibers, the animal fibers, and we have developed a number of standards over the years and have really built up quite a suite of fiber material level standards for companies and chain of custody standards as well, to help with that transparency issue. And we also launched what we call our Climate Plus strategy just last year, which is a really wonderful time to be involved with AWS and having these conversations, given that climate is a very cross-sectoral and very urgent issue, of course. So we've set a climate target, and we've also broadened our climate vision and mission to include biodiversity, water, soil health, and really just looking at the reality that you can't address climate, particularly at the raw material level, without looking at all those codependencies around nature. So a really good time to be having these conversations about that site-specific and multi-stakeholder approach to looking at these challenges.
Okay, thank you, Liesel. And is it? I guess it's quite a challenge. Also, it can be a challenge to take your suppliers into this journey, right? I mean, a sector body is one thing. Your fashion members is also one thing, but the supply chain. Maybe shortly, how do you look at that?
Yeah, and I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think the industry has, as I see it, evolved over the last, I'd say 10 years, from looking at a very, very anonymous commodity-driven approach to raw materials, to sort of recognizing, okay, we're in this together, a little bit of codependency starting to creep into the relationships, more technology, right, to be able to trace and track where things are coming from. But it's really only now that I'm seeing this more holistic approach that is very much stakeholder and site specific, and looking at the geographies and the stresses and the hotspots. So it's an interesting time to start bringing more of that supplier relationship into focus, because the only way we're going to have any positive, long-lasting impacts that Andre mentioned earlier.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, maybe as a next question, let's zoom in a little bit more on the AWS standard. I think I guess that any standard needs to be clear, needs to be able to be used not only by you but also by the rest of the chain, right? What do you think of the what attracts you to the standard? I think that's an important question. And is there a particular thing that working with the standard basically helps you to work also across the chain? Maybe Karen, can you share a bit of your views?
Sure, Hans. So in PepsiCo, we have committed to adopting the AWS standard at all of our high water risk operating facilities by 2025. So that's about 100 sites. So really for us, the value of the AWS standard is the framework it gives us to get involved and understand the water challenges within the areas, within the catchments we operate in, and identifying our stakeholders, collaborators that we can work with in order to improve our water risk in those catchments. So as I mentioned earlier, for many years, we've been very focused within our own operations. We're very good at what we can directly control. We've been driving efficiency for many, many years, but we realized that we had to go wider, we had to go bigger. Water risk, water challenges were bigger than just PepsiCo's factory. So really the AWS framework has given us kind of a formal approach on how to go about doing this, how to get our sites involved, how to get the cross-functional groups within PepsiCo, our public policy, government affairs, our comms people. How do we find out what other peer companies, like-minded companies are doing in our catchments? How can we partner up with them to get involved in good projects that, again, deliver that scale in terms of improving watershed health and try to reduce the water risk in the locations we operate in for the common good. So really that's what AWS is bringing to the table for us.
Yeah, and apparently the water issue is so important that you are focusing on a specific standard, because the alternative could be that you adopt a more general sustainability standard or like a global gap type of thing. But here it apparently pays off, or it's really justified to take a dedicated standard, right?
Exactly. I mean, all water challenges are very local. So the AWS standard really zones in on what's happening in your catchment and really directs you on where to look, how to look, what's considered significant, and how to determine significance and materiality. So yeah, it's really given us that valuable insights into tackling water stewardship at a catchment and a site level.
Okay, thanks.
And to add like that to that, Karen, I think also the AWS standards, they actually involve the whole catchment area, where a lot of standards only look at the factory. What is the factory doing, and how can we manage the water inside the factory, but not taking the whole community into consideration, where we see that water, the community is needed, and the whole catchment area look is needed to actually manage water in the right way.
Right, right. And I heard a lot about the adoption of the standard. I don't hear still much about certification. I mean, maybe Maeve, can you tell a bit about your distinction between certification and adoption of a standard in your
Yeah, sure. I mean, just we've got a very, very similar story to PepsiCo on our approach. I just want to add in a couple of other things, that reasons why we adopted AWS. Mainly, well, it totally integrates into our existing manufacturing process. So we have a manufacturing excellence program within our factories. And because the AWS program is very kind of aligned with the plan, do, check, act cycle, it integrates really well within our 7 steps of manufacturing excellence, but it also integrates really well within any factories that are implementing the ISO 14001 program. So it meant that we could integrate it into existing programs, and there wasn't a standalone initiative just on water. So that was super important to us. And then tell me again your question, the thing you wanted to know.
Maybe I'm a bit intrigued that you have, of course, adoption of standards, and you have certifying the whole value chain. And the question is whether that is also really a goal for Unilever, to have a full certification of full value chain, or that you say, okay, we think for the moment
Okay.
we focus on adoption of standards, etc.
So at the moment, we're adopting the standard because we are interested in the values that come from it in terms of risk mitigation. Certainly the logo that's been developed by AWS may be of interest into the future as water becomes a much more of a priority issue for our consumers. But at the moment, we're getting our factories certifiable ready, but not certifying yet. We're leaving it down to the factory directors to decide, based on the context in which they operate, is there value for them in certifying or not. Probably not what Sarah and the AWS team want to hear, but certainly we're seeing early value being created from this approach already.
Okay. Maybe Andre, to finalize the value chain in food, what does attract you to AWS?
In general, we see great potential standards can play in reducing water risk in our supply chain, but we are aware there are big challenges, and as Sarah mentioned before, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and that can be applied across completely diversified supply chains or value chains. And as a study of our partner WWF in 2016 has shown, there are gaps in existing agricultural standards when it comes to issues of water stewardship. What surprised us most was that organic standards tend to have less water stewardship criteria than the average of conventional standards, and therefore we thought about what can we do, and in 2016 we entered to the AWS network as a member, and as I mentioned before, we entered a translatable cooperation with AWS and WWF to contribute the advancement and promotion of the standard and criteria. And we applied the standard in 2 of our field projects in Colombia and Ecuador regarding conventional banana production. And we also have another field project in Spain regarding citrus production near Seville. And we get a lot of data and experiences, and we also see great potential to contribute discussions with other standard systems like Global GAC, for example, because we are thinking we have interconnections between different standards, and we have to use the synergies. in future.
Yeah. So you
to reduce costs and so on and so on.
So I think you are very much looking at bringing or taking the standard to a higher level, not just a site, but really to a country, to sectors. And I can imagine that for Edeka, that it is very important. And you work with WWF to scale that. Maybe for Liesel, how do you see coalitions, the importance of coalitions and maybe working with other standards, other certifications, etc., to further your water stewardship journey?
Yeah, that's a great question, Hans, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see the journey over the next few years as we start to get more, I suppose, more comfortable with the relationships and the obligations and the responsibilities and of course the opportunities for companies, the brands, as Annika was saying before, at the possibly a long way away from their original sort of supply production zones, but being able to mix and match a little bit. So to use good quality fiber or commodity or product-based standards with chain of custody that's going to be addressing, say, for example, soil health, and as part of a water management strategy, looking holistically at what's going on their farm, on the production area, and then sort of connecting that to their final product. But as I said, mix and matching that with something that is more site specific and, basin specific. And, as Sarah was saying, really taking in those catchment level opportunities and risks. And I think, Karen, you put it really, really well about that you've got to go broader. We've got to look more holistically. We've got to be more engaged in a region to actually get those longer term results. And I think for me, that's one of the big opportunities of AWS, is to be able to think about this in a longer term, more embedded, if you like, legacy of resilience in a region. Supply chains move around the place, rightly or wrongly. It used to be a competitive advantage to do that. It's not anymore. The risks out of that competitive advantage and finding the cheapest product, etc., are outweighed now by the opportunity to be more resilient within a supply chain, to build security of supply, and to do good in a region. I think that's more of the ambition that we have to sort of shift into now in new business models. But yeah, I think the mix and matching, the opportunity to use water as common ground and have those conversations within those diverse stakeholders. And I think, was it Annika, you mentioned community, and everybody's talked about there's not one solution fits all. And I think culture and the cultural relationship to water, and I think AWS, and being able to sort of engage in those conversations around the cultural importance, as well as the in-stream rights and how to connect that to business needs, of course.
Yeah, so you mentioned community, and I recollect that, or I reconnect to that also in food and agribusiness, that often the relations and the explanation, the discussion with communities are, particularly in also developing markets, can be very tough and need a lot of time. I think that's probably one of the key issues, that it's really a long-term journey. It's not a short term, particularly also on site basis. You really need to take time to align and to create that common understanding, I guess, with the different stakeholders. Investors. We are, let's say, an investor, a bank that basically pushes our clients to adopt good water stewardship. If they are not, if we feel that maybe there's still improvement necessary, to what extent do you feel the warm breath of investors behind you? Are they pushing water, or maybe is water just one of the sustainability factors that need to be addressed anyway? Maybe in textile, how is it? Yeah, how do you look at that? Maybe Anneke.
Yes, thank you, Hans. I have to say that for investors, it's a bit, difficult question for us to answer since we are a family-owned company. So we do not have too much to do with investors. But of course, there's always customers that are. So I think it's a little bit similar. They are looking more and more on the environmental impact of the products. So we also have to look into what is the water use of a certain product, and how do we address water stewardship, water management into our whole value chain, from growing the commodity or the cotton, or the fibers that we use, all the way towards the end, the washing of the garments. Yeah.
Right. Okay, maybe Karen, can you give your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, we partake every year in CDP disclosure program, and recently have started completing SASB reporting as well. So we're very transparent in all of our sustainability performance, and we're always aiming to improve our score on prior year as we execute our sustainability programs and deliver the big ambition on sustainability that we have. So that's really our main mechanism for getting our performance across to our investors. So it is, I mean, investors always look at the CDP scoring. They tend to look at sustainability as a whole, from my experience so far, rather than zoning in on water specifically. But we probably feel that could be coming in the future, whereby sustainability elements will be broken apart by investors as they dig deep into specific areas and our performance in specific, maybe high water risk or stressed areas.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Maeve, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, similarly, we report on CDP for our investor base, but over the last year, I have to say I've seen a marked interest in the amount of specific requests we've had from the investor community, deep diving into our water use. Principally going through that CDP response and benchmarking, things like that. Only one investor, a smaller investor, who's obviously very strong capabilities around environmental issues, is asked specifically around AWS, but really looking at what are the outcomes of it and how is that driving risk mitigation within the business, rather than any kind of information on like certification or the details of it. But you can totally see like an increase in interest from investor communities, probably linked to the climate narrative as well. I mean, I think people are just opening up to the understanding that climate change is water change. And certainly great to see the Barclays True Cost of Water report that just came out, I think it was in June this year, looking specifically at the consumer staples sector and how exposed different companies are around water risks.
Yeah. It also fits into the whole discussion of climate adaptation, right? But still, it probably also has to compete with the carbon emission discussion at the moment. It's part of the same discussion, I guess. Andre, your investors, are they very vocal, and are they aware of AWS, of water stewardship, etc.?
Not really, because our structure is a little bit different, because we are a cooperative. Because our 3,600 independent retailers are my investors. So, and therefore we are not very under stress by investors. But currently, one of our banks asked us about our sustainability strategy, and water was one integral part of our sustainability strategy, and therefore maybe we could get a better conditions from our bank this year, because it was the first time in my experience at Edeka that one of our banks asked us regarding sustainability and water, and it was very helpful for us to have our annual monitoring with our KPIs with WWF Germany and KPMG every year. We do a monitoring, we have a progress report, and it might help. It might help.
As FMO, we provide also sustainability-linked loans, whereby indeed we reduce cost if companies can adhere to certain environmental standards, and that's a very interesting and exciting movement, I think. So we should also do our bit into that. Thank you, Andre. Maybe as another sort of last question before we go also to the audience questions, if there are any. So the standard, the AWS standard, is a written framework. Behind it, there's a whole organization that's responsible for helping to grow the adoption of the standard. What advice would you give AWS as an organization to focus on and help to build scaled adoption into your sector? So that's quite a question. And I see Maeve smiling a little bit, so I'm going to Maeve.
Okay, sure. So probably two things, request or recommendation for the AWS team. Firstly, collective action and partnerships takes a lot of work. If you want good partnerships, you've got to really invest in them. So I think something that would be really useful for us is support of local capability building and really helping to develop actionable and collective programs that can make an impact. So these kind of bankable project type approach. We've got some really good experience working with the AWS Indonesia team. So Baja and Agni there, who have set up the Water Coalition in Indonesia with TNC. And they're really providing a lot of support to our local team. So I'd love to see that replicated in other areas and see how they can mobilize business on the ground to really make action happen. The other thing I'd recommend is, water's, we just mentioned it, like water's not a standalone issue. And so we don't view it in isolation in Unilever. We certainly don't view it in isolation on the ground where things are happening. And so I think we need to be better at looking at how water and the plastics narrative overlap, how water and the climate adaptation or climate mitigation actions overlap, health and hygiene, things like that, and how we can deliver multiple outcomes with common actions, if you like. So co-benefits are super important. So I'd love to see more case studies and examples coming out of the network, and how people maybe are engaging brands with the co-benefits, not necessarily just on water.
Okay. Karen, any thoughts there?
I think Maeve has put it very well. Absolutely, they would be two elements that would really benefit PepsiCo's experience as we adopt the standard as well. That whole collective action piece is critically important, and it can be quite difficult for us to try and identify opportunities or projects to get involved in ourselves. So certainly that would be a big one that we would be very supportive on. AWS maybe doing a bit more to build out how we can have an influence at scale with partners and peers.
Okay, thank you. Andre, what about you?
Yeah, maybe I just add, in future, I think we need a sector-specific structure of AWS, because the challenges in the agricultural business are different to others, I think. And I think as well a positive development within the AWS network is that they initiated a working group regarding agriculture, and AWS members who are acting with the agricultural sector in the daily businesses are invited to be an active part of this group, a working group in future, and to improve and customize feasible and suitable solutions for market transformation of AWS. That's our aim, and that is my recommendation.
Okay, thanks. Liesel, what about you?
Yeah, I think these are all great recommendations and ideas. I think we do need more case studies, more sort of recipes for success, and how others are doing it, that can, I mean, to Andre's point a little bit, how it works within a specific sector, but a little bit to what Maeve was saying in terms of looking almost cross products, cross sectors. It's kind of also connected to this concept, isn't it, of a sort of circular economy, even within an agricultural system, looking at that circularity of the water and nutrients, and as well as sort of end product back into sort of technical cycles. So water is obviously very cross-cutting. I think that's one of the magic opportunities that if we can really identify how water works to as that connective, sort of a metaphor, but connecting everybody within a supply chain, but also in the broader context. So yeah, case studies and examples to learn from, I think would be great.
Anneke, to finalize, any point to add here?
Yeah, I would think most things have been said already by my, but I think AWS is really in a unique position to link brands together because there's a lot of, I would say, overlap in catchment areas. So I really hope that AWS can help us there also to work together with other companies and maybe build capacity in the factories that we are working with and also in the surrounding communities. And then to add what Maeve was saying about aligning with other standards, there's more and more nature, a holistic approach on nature with climate, with biodiversity. And I really hope that we can align the standards that are being developed at the moment on, on nature, I would say. So AWS can also play a role there, I see.
Okay.
I'd also put just on that point too, Anneke, I'd also put in a request to support the industry and us at Textile Exchange and our members in getting right back to raw material. So Andre, Maeve and Karen, have got probably closer relationships with suppliers and producers on the ground. So being able to learn from you how to do that and apply it in a textile context. I know we've done a fair bit of work on the water efficiency, the water management, as we've all sort of talked about today, and getting that back to farm level, forest level, ranch level, and the catchment stakeholders that are within those communities would be a great thing too.
Thanks all. We have a bit less than 10 minutes for some other audience questions. There were some questions on legal obligations. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts about it. So thoughts on legal obligations through, for example, the supply chain law that is coming in through a EU directive. How is this going to impact corporate water stewardship? Maybe Anneke, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's meant here that they, talk about the product environmental footprint, the law that will come into play at a certain point. So yeah, that will definitely also make it important for us to make visible what the impact is of products. And so I don't know if that's what's being meant here, but there is some some law coming up on environmental impact.
Yeah, it will also be interesting to hear from Sarah maybe how AWS can help there, and is the standard of AWS is again supporting this. Maybe Karen, do you have a thought on the legal obligations that may come our way in that respect?
Yeah, again, to be clear on what specifically the question is, I'm not too clear, but certainly we're always looking at improving our footprint, reducing our climate impact, improving our water impact all the time. So regardless of not whether this law is coming at us, it's something we're very conscious of. We always want to have a minimal impact on natural resources for everything that we do. So it feeds into our strategy anyway. So we're hoping that we're ahead of such regulations as they come to pass globally.
Yeah, I guess this is also relates to the whole EU taxonomy that is being formulated. Anyway, Maeve, you have any thoughts about EU regulatory frameworks changing?
It's out of my remit, but similar to Karen, we've got programs in place that we've had in place for many years. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know the answer on that one.
Yeah. Andre, you?
Not really.
Maybe, Liesel, is that something that you were looking at, or?
So the EU directive, I think just taking Anneke's lead there on product and environmental footprints. I know within our industry, life cycle assessment plays a kind of interesting role. I think it's part of our quest for improvement in data and reliability of data and kind of representation of data. And of course, LCA is one of the best opportunities to standardize how we we arrive at sort of an understanding of the impact. At the moment in our industry, LCA is fairly generic unless a particular company or company has done their own life cycle assessment. The industry is fairly reliant on globalized averages. So I think, you know, with this sort of move towards understanding impact through life cycle assessment, I think it's a journey, and I think of course, with water being so localized, as we've all pointed out, we will be looking to the AWS as well for advice on that, because it's very difficult and, well, arguably impossible to standardize, you know, water scarcity, water consumption in a globalized average context. You do need to start regionalizing this sort of data, which I don't think we're there yet. Generally, some companies will be more advanced than others. Okay, thanks.
There are various questions. Maybe one for all, if you can answer that maybe shortly, is there are basically beyond local water risk factors. What other factors influence water stewardship decisions at different scales? So how important are internal, external drivers? If you understand the question. I mean, maybe Andre is. What do you think?
It's very important. Firstly, you need the buy-in of your CEO or managing board. First step. Second step is for us to analyze your water risks in your value chain, and thirdly, you have to define mitigation options on the basis of analyzers. And finally, you have to get your business partners on board and to convince them to raise awareness of the necessity of water stewardship. And finally, start working.
Karen, what about you?
Yeah, in terms of the players, and as we're getting involved with stakeholder engagements in our communities, we're finding out a lot more about what specifically is driving some of the risks at local locations and who the players are and why. So really, there's a lot of actors in this space, and we're learning a lot as we go through the AWS adoptions to identify, okay, what can we do and what's I suppose unique in certain locations and what is common. So we're learning a lot as we go. There's a lot of stakeholders, a lot of people involved, a lot more than we probably originally thought. Some locations are more complex than others. Sometimes there's a more regulatory framework, or there's a lot more players in the regulatory space that you need to be conscious of and get involved with. And sometimes they can have a different take on what actually is happening at a local level. So yeah, it's a learning curve for us as well as we go to understand this whole space. So we're learning a lot, and it's adding a lot of value to our business. And the whole aim is about mitigating risk for ourselves and the communities we're in. So we're on that journey.
Okay, thanks. Maybe Maeve as a last.
Yeah, so yeah, likewise, super important, both internal and external influences. I'd say we've been very fortunate to get like top level support on this. So prior to kicking off any program, we've had leadership fully engaged and connecting with the local teams, which has really given it that kind of elevation within the company in terms of, you know, people wanting this to be their like legacy program that they leave behind and the impact that it could have on local communities. But likewise with Karen, I'd say you know, we started thinking these are quite, you know, we just need to fix the sanitation problem in the local community. And I think you realize actually water governance is super complicated. But thankfully the AWS program is providing us kind of a bit of a process that we're following to identify and engage stakeholders. So a lot more stakeholders than we anticipated, more complicated, and the role of governance is like absolutely fundamental. So just recognizing as well, it's often a different lever you need to pull that certainly our factory teams are not used to engaging in these like relationship. It's not their bread and butter, let's say. It's really something different. And so yeah, this is another reason why we need you know, the full force of the business behind it.
Thanks a lot. I'm sorry, Lisa, Anneke, for sake of time we have to start wrapping up. I think it's very important to have these kind of discussions between different sectors, different value chains, to learn from each other. I think that's always good. Yeah, let's all work. I think Andre mentioned it. In the end, it's blood, sweat, and tears to make progress. Also very important. Sarah, over to you maybe for last word as well.
Thank you, Hans. Yes, and thank you to our panel and to our audience. There are tons of audience questions still coming in, so the AWS team are going to do their best to respond to all of them now, because we haven't had a chance to feed everything into the panel. But I've been really encouraged to hear the sort of breadth of discussion that we've had today. I think it's been really useful to share some of the different levers and drivers that are going on, whether it's your internal business connections, the drivers that come from regulation and policy, but also to hear some of the stories of what's actually working on the ground. So thank you for your time on that. We'll leave you with just some actions for our audience. If you wish to find out more about AWS, you can see a list of different things on the screen that you can perhaps do. You can obviously access all of our resources on our website, and we have a regular newsletter that goes out to keep you informed about developments in the AWS system. And you've got some of our contact details there on the screen as well. So if you don't manage to catch one of us in the Pathable platform during World Water Week, you've also got my email address and our info email address if you have another question that comes to you that you would like to have a discussion about. I think I'll leave it there because we're 1 minute past the hour, but thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the session, and thank you again to Hans for a great job chairing the session, and to our speakers, especially those of you that got up particularly early this morning. See you all soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.